Not. To Dr. Walter Fernandes, our director, our leader. He was formerly also the director of research at Animation and Research Center, Yangon, Myanmar, and he is the founder director of NESRC since 2000. Before moving to the Northeast, he was director of research and of tribal studies at Indian Social Institute, New Delhi. He was also the editor of Social Action. He has worked extensively on tribal issues, gender issues, development-induced displacement, and conflict and peace. He has to his credit more than 50 books, over 200 professional articles, and 150 newspaper articles on these issues. He has also been a member of several Government India committees, the last one being the National Commission for Land Reforms chaired by the Prime Minister. He has also been a visiting lecturer in some universities in India and abroad. Sir, I hand over the mic to you.
Friends of North Indian Social Research Center, I'm standing here with a sense of gratitude. I'm standing here with a sense of gratitude to God and to all of you and so many others who have made Northeastern Social Research Center what it is. We began with very few resources, very little in material resources, but we accepted the challenge, knowing that there were people who were ready to support us, and we have felt that support. And you are among them. Thank you for that. We began with a mandate to support the youth, in particular of the Northeast, to be a presence in the Northeast at a moment of crisis. That was a moment of crisis, 2000, when the Northeast was searching for a new identity, was considered marginal to the rest of India. And we were told to encourage research, understanding, and new thinking about the Northeast, here in the Northeast, and in what is known in this region as mainland India, peninsular India, where it remains a marginal territory. And we have tried, not always with success, but we have been able to do something thanks to the support we have received from so many of you. We have been involved. Our mandate was serious intellectual pursuits with involvement with communities in search, communities struggling for their rights, with civil society groups, with researchers, policy makers, for advocacy for policies in favor of the marginalized. We have attempted that through research and action, networking, seminars, and meeting place for people with opposing views to come together and to discuss in a peaceful atmosphere rather than through violence. we have attempted to support intellectual pursuits, research, and new thinking by the youth of this region. We have not succeeded fully, but we have attempted it. And we have been able to do that. We have tried it on tribal issues, gender issues, livelihood and land issues, conflicts and peace. And if we have achieved anything in that, it is thanks to the support we have received from so many of you. Thank you for that, and welcome to this celebration of collaboration, celebration of new thinking, celebration of the youth taking new thinking in their own hands. First of all, I welcome Peace Sainath. I don't have to introduce you. People know you. The moment I phoned to him, he said, yes. Thank you, Sainath. Thank you, Dr. Samudra Gupta, Kashyap, Chancellor of Nagaland University. Again, you were traveling when you got my phone call, and it took exactly 2 minutes to say yes. Thank you. Of Samba Budia, I just sent you your letter. By the evening, I received a positive reply. That shows the sense of collaboration that you have. And all of you who have been with us all these years, thank you and welcome to this moment of celebration. And thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Walter, for that warm welcome. I now invite Dr. Samudra Gupta, Kashyap, to address the crowd, but before that, I will introduce him. Born in Jorhat in 1960, Dr. Samudra Gupta Kashyap is currently the Chancellor of Nagaland University, a renowned journalist of all India repute. He did his MA in English Literature from Cotton College and specialized in development journalism from the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, New Delhi. He holds a PhD in management from the erstwhile Assam Rajiv Gandhi University of Cooperative Management, which is now Sibsagar University. Dr. Kashyap began his career as a professional journalist in 1981 with the launch of Prantik. In 1987, he shifted to Dainik Assam, and then in 1991 to the Indian Express. He remained a journalist for close to 4 decades, during which he reported extensively from the northeastern region for the outside world. He has received several prestigious awards for his contribution to journalism and society. Significant among them are the Transparency International India's Award for Exposing Corruption, the Bhupen Hazarika National Award, the Lifetime Achievement by IIMC Alumni Association, and Netaji Garima Award. A bilingual writer, Dr. Kashyap has been author and co-author of over 20 books in English and Assamese. His 5 recent books are Untold Stories of the Freedom Struggle from Northeast India, Assam's Greatest Heroes Who Fought the Muslim Invasions, India-Bangladesh, 50 Years of Friendship, More Swadeshar, Bir Lachit Barfukan, and Assam Tea, Glorious 200 Years. A researcher of repute, he had done the research and written the script for Bhupen Hazarika's last project, a 26-episode Doordarshan mega serial titled Brahmaputra, Son of Brahma, An Endless Journey. After completion of his journalistic career, the government of Assam appointed him as a State Information Commissioner in 2020, a post he held till August 2023. Immediately upon completion of his 3-year term as State Information Commissioner, Dr. Kashyap was in September 2023 appointed as Chancellor of Nagaland University by the President of India in his capacity as visitor. Dr. Kashyap's PhD degree is particularly significant in that it is pioneering research work on Shankardeva studies, the topic being the leadership qualities and social innovations of Srimanta Shankardev. This, incidentally, is the first management PhD on Srimanta Shankardev. Dr. Kashyap has been associated with several academic institutions, a former governing body member of OKD Institute of Social Change and Development, Guwahati, and Indian Institute of Democratic Leadership, Mumbai. He is currently member of the Special Center for Study of the Northeast at JNU, New Delhi. Dr. Kashyap is also a founding member of the Society to Harmonize Aspirations for Responsible Engagement, SHARE, a newly formed Northeast-based think tank and policy advocacy group, and a trustee of Srimanta Foundation for Culture and Society. Now I hand the mic over to you, sir.
A very, very good evening to all of you. Thank you for the generous introduction. Old friend Dr. Walter Fernandes, P. Sainath, I can pronounce it. Jagannathan, yeah. Father Thomas Pinamburambe, Father Dion Thomas, and so many old friends are here, friends, students, and invitees. I have known Dr. Fernandes for as many years as he has been working with the Northeastern Social Research Center as a journalist. Used to once in a while drop in my office when I was with the newspaper. And occasionally it also sent emails and a report or a book or a booklet published by the center, which throws insight into various aspects of the Northeastern region. At the very outset, we must all congratulate heartily Dr. Fernandes for launching such a wonderful institution which has completed a quarter of a century today. A quarter of a century is no joke. To run an institution and to run with it, running for 25 years, not the institution, but he has been running at this age. We must also congratulate all the interesting people who have been associated with this, beginning with the first employee, as I said, Dr. Sanjay Borbora, who is a younger brother to me, and also all the supporting and funding agencies which have made it possible for the center to sustain, to carry on its wonderful work, and to help the center throw light on so many aspects of our societies, of our communities across the Northeast and beyond. Why I'm saying beyond, because he had worked in Myanmar, and one of his very landmark research study on the land border issues in Myanmar and between India. That is a very wonderful report that they had come out with. The Northeast, as we all know, the word Northeast itself is a little over 200 years old. It was apparently coined by David Scott, who became the first agent to the Governor General for this region, which he termed as Northeast. Northeast, if you look at the map of India, is not Northeast, it's East. But those days, 200 years ago, from Calcutta it was Northeast, and that is why we are in the Northeast. So, the Northeast, unlike other regions of the subcontinent, is unique in so many aspects. One of the most important aspects is that almost all the human races which exist in the world, the traces of these human races are available, or they live in they are found in the northeast. This doesn't happen to most other regions of this country, or maybe to even other countries altogether. I'm not talking about US, where all the people have migrated from all over to be there. The northeast has been part of a very, very old migration route and also a trade route. Migration has been going on. We have seen in our lifetimes. Migration has happened in the last 200 years, 300 years, where we read in history. The trouble that Manipur has been experiencing is also probably because of the migration that isn't happening. Some of our communities are continue to be nomadic, continue to be moving northward from the south, from the tip of the south of the northeastern region. The northeast has been was part of the SSR, they call it the Southern Silk Route. And this finds mention in so many old documents, including the earliest mention is in the Arthashastra of Chanakya, which talks about a particular leaf, the bay leaf, which was transported to mainland India through the northeast, and also Chinese silk and so on. We have settlers from other parts of West, from Europe and other countries, from the Mediterranean, who have settled down here, become indigenous, quote-unquote indigenous communities here. Communities which came in 1824, between 1817 and 1821, during the 3 rounds of Burmese invasion, and who have stayed back, part of the large Thai race, two of the small Thai families in the northeast. They have become indigenous to the northeast. People who came, communities who came to Assam in the backdrop of the 2 successive labor strikes in the tea industry in 1942 and 1842 and 1857. The communities which were brought in after 1859 have become one of the most important communities of Assam, where they have together become a combined community which has been identified by the nature of work or the industry they have been involved with, which we call the tea community or the tea tribes. We don't have a coffee tribe anywhere in the world, we don't have an iron ore tribe, we don't have a timber tribe, we don't have a silk tribe, but we have a tea tribe or a tea community in our region, in our state. This is very peculiar to our region. So I have been fortunate enough to travel across the length and breadth of the Northeast for 40 years. My profession made this happen to me. Been to places which are not connected by roads, which are connected by roads, which are connected by river, which are not connected even by a boat, wading across river several times, crossing the single bamboo stick, the haku as we call it, and so on, getting lost in the middle of the Brahmaputra because the water level had risen in the month of June or July while tracking the murderers of Sanjay Ghosh and so on. And it has taken me to so many communities, some of which probably have not yet been recorded in the government. We have one community I know of which one community which was recorded in the 1961 census was shown in Garo Hills, and in the subsequent census reports they deserted from Garo Hills and they appeared somewhere in Karbi Anglong, like that. There have been incidents where in the 1951 census a group of people were not visited by the RGI representatives, and nobody went to that place, and all their names are put there, and the middle bracket was put there and said other Naga tribes. And that injustice continued, so much so that those who discovered that they have been nomenclatured as other Naga tribes, they went and see. The government of India tells you are Nagas, so you have to put this there and be under this particular blue flag and other flag. This happened in Tuensang, this happened in Tirap, this has happened in Longding and so on. Unfortunately, I am not a researcher, I was a reporter, and I have to go to the place only once in a while when something happens. There has to be an incident to go there, and that incident is the only incentive. Despite that, having been a trained journalist or been a student of development communication in the famous Indian Institute of Mass Communication, where they taught us about development being an input for, media being an input for development, So sometimes we try to follow, track a story. I'll just tell you one story and then I'll close my presentation here. In 2016, a boy from somewhere near Nazira, near Namti, he was killed, he died while on the way to Kerala. He had gone there with other boys. There was a train called the Vivek Express, the longest train in India, 76 hours 45 minutes it takes from Dibrugarh to Trivandrum. It was a weekly train earlier, now it has become a daily from last year. And every Saturday when it starts from Dibrugarh, this train takes about 1600 young people from the northeast, mostly dropouts and jobless people from the villages, and they all go to Kerala. Mostly they head for Kerala, and the 2014 report of the Kerala government says, of all the incoming daily wages and laborers working in Kerala, 19.6 are from Assam. Huge population. We remember that incident when somebody had sent a SMS, a threatening SMS, and thousands of these people from the belonging to the northeast had returned home by within 2-3 days in train loads, if you remember that. So those are the people. And this boy died. I tried to find out what is the background. We did a special story in our newspaper, and we found out that this train carries 1600 to 1700 young people, boys and girls, beginning from Arunachal Pradesh, and the last people would be Garos and Khasis who would board on the Boros at Gosaigao and Gwalpara, and they all head towards the southern India. Why? That why part is very interesting. It's not that there is no work here, but they don't want to work here. This boy, particular boy who had disappeared, who had got killed, his parents told me that when he is here, he gets some work, he knew how to operate that tiller machine. So when somebody asked him to do that job, he gets 300 rupees for that, and his friends would be waiting in the Tinyari there, that he would come with 200 rupees or 300 rupees, catch him, take him to the nearest place, he will get the booze, and then they get drunk, he has to be carried home. So his parents wanted him to go away from there and find some work there. And in Kerala and other places where they work in 2 shifts. The same people who don't work here, they work in 2 shifts because they have nothing else to do. They are mostly protected inside their factories. And with the arrival of this machine, they are connected to their families. They can talk to their wives, they can talk to their parents. They don't have to pay a middleman to get the salary delivered home. Every month, these about 6 lakh young people working outside. I and Omia Sharma tried to do a study there. 6 lakh young people send home between 2,000 rupees a month to up to about 10,000 rupees. If we assume only 2,000 rupees per month into 6 lakhs, you have 8 zeros behind 12. I don't know how much it be. I'm not good in mathematics, arithmetic. 12, and then put 8 zeros behind it. 5 from the lakh and 3 from the 1,000. That much money flows into the. And where does this money go? You'll be very interested to find out. Before all these schemes had come, another boy from a place called Narayanpur, Bordeuri village, he had died in a submarine accident in Mumbai. And I wanted to find out who this boy would be from a remote place in Bordeuri village, because I visited the Bordeuri village when the ULFA had organized the press conference in 1989. And I got another occasion to find out there. The moment I reached that place, his old mother, illiterate, Deuri is a small tribe, she asked me, latrine ase? You have a latrine at home? I said, I was surprised. Then she said, no, she had been only talking about a latrine for the last 4-5 days when the news of her son had come. Why? Because he had promised her to build a latrine there. He marketed a place in the backyard. Next time he will build her a latrine. Why? Because he had taken his father to Bombay and he had used the latrine there. He came home and he told his wife that there is something called latrine which we can use, which is better. And she is only talking about this. She got completely wild because she lost her son. And this boy who had gone there and got killed, he was originally a first division in matriculation. He didn't have money to go to college. Some of his village people and teachers collected money, raised money for him. He went to Narayanpur College, got a first division in higher secondary, and got selected into engineering, came to Assam Engineering College. The villagers and these teachers gave him 20,000 rupees for that. First semester he was topper, second semester he was topper, third semester he had no money. He went back home, Then he started looking for where I get jobs without paying a bribe, and he got into the Indian Navy. So these are interesting stories I came across. Unfortunately, I couldn't do a detailed research on that. But what I today recall is that every such incident that I go to report is a topic for a research, which is appropriate for a center like the Northeastern Regional Research Center. So, n number of stories. The other day I was talking to Professor Murthy is here. Professor Pradeep Jyoti Mahanta, he is a dean in the department in your university. He is a very renowned folklorist and a Sankardev scholar. He was telling us he got a scholar who wanted to do and she was selected for doing a story on the folk songs of a particular tribe, her tribe from Nagaland. She was very happy. She did the basics of what would be the research format, this happens, and the questionnaire would be. When she goes on, nobody can recall those songs. The songs have been lost. One, because of the arrival of the English. Secondly, because of so many other social things, developments that have happened there. So one of the biggest victims of development was the disappearance of the language and disappearance of the tradition and heritage and folk songs and music and everything. So these are small things that are happening, which needs to be, we need at least, I think, 25, 30 such Northeastern research centers to carry out these studies before we land in a situation where we all just become voters and people in the beneficiaries list and not individuals or people who belong to communities which have cultures, which have heritage, which have traditional knowledge and so many other things. We are all waiting to listen to P. Sainath. I know I should be taking much of a time, but I once again congratulate Dr. Walter Fernandes and his entire team, and I'm only a well-wisher, nothing beyond that, but then I think, I don't know why you have invited me to be here. I don't qualify to be here, but then I think all of us, we should continue supporting the center, and then also, sir, one small appeal is that these interesting research studies that have been done, I know some of these have been used by the government. There are a few studies done for the government also. But I think it also needs to be taken to the communities. What is happening in Arunachal Pradesh is not known by people in Assam. What is happening in Assam is not known by people in Nagaland. What is happening in Tripura is not known in Mizoram. It's like that. We don't know each other. The communities do not know each other. I was talking to young people at JB College, and I was talking about 3 layers of neighborhood that we have in Assam. The Assamese people are surrounded by Rabha, Deori, Kosari and all others. Then we have the northeastern states, 6 states of Northeast and West Bengal surrounding us. Then we have China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan surrounding us. And then the entire world is watching us. And we do not know about ourselves. So I think we need institutions like this, and we need people who lead from the front, like Dr. Walter Fernandes. Thank you once again, and once again I heartily congratulate you, sir, for this wonderful journey. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap, for sharing your stories with us. We now have approached the awaited talk by Mr. P. Sainath. Mr. Palagumi Sainath is a well-renowned man in the field of journalism, rural and agrarian advocacy, as an author, activist, and a brilliant human being. His most popular endeavor being the founding of the People's Archive of Rural India, or PARI, a living journal, a breathing archive of rural India. PARI is a multimedia digital journalism platform that covers the stories of India's villages, the artisans, farmers, workers, its women, youth and children, doing exceptional work in 15 languages. Mr. Sainath is also the author of Everybody Loves a Good Drought. That is the name of his book, which is a collection of his field reports as a journalist. He has been recognized for his remarkable trailblazing contribution to Indian journalism, highlighting the plight of rural India with several awards, including the Amnesty International Global Human Rights Journalism Prize, UN's Food and Agricultural Organization's Boema Prize, Raman Magsaysay Award, among others. So someone with a truly extraordinary legacy. We are honored to have Mr. Sainath in our company. With that, I welcome you to deliver your most awaited talks.
Thank you very much, Deshnath. First of all, thanks to all of you showing up on a Saturday evening when you have many options and alternatives for entertainment. And I'm conscious we are beginning very late. So I'm sorry about that and thank you for this. I would also like to congratulate Walter and the Northeastern Social Cultural Research Center. I don't know if Walter remembers it, but I met him 32 years ago on a flight from Ranchi to Delhi, and I noticed this guy intently reading a story on an army firing range in Netrahat, Palamu, which was displacing lots of tribals and actually putting them to total misery. Not even displacing them permanently, but whenever the army wanted to try its Bofors guns or howitzers, they would all be pushed into the forest for 3 days at Netrahat in Palamu. And I was very flattered because I had done that story. So I turned around, he was in the seat behind me, and I said, by the way, I did that story. So it also appears in Everybody Loves a Good Drought. It's called In the Army's Line of Fire. Now, and actually, Walter, I think I've taken on too much when I look at the topic because media, journalism, research, engagement, that's quite a bit. So I'm going to have to crunch somewhere. But let me begin by saying that in our time we have to recognize, and you as researchers have to analyze media and journalism as two distinctly different entities. They are no longer the same. The media has very little to do with journalism. Okay? Journalism is what guys like I do for a living. Once upon a time it used to be what the media did. But the media are essentially profit-making, profit-seeking, profit-maximizing corporations. They will cover what brings in revenue. That is the single, so if you're going to analyze media, analyze journalism differently, but if you're going to analyze media and you're going to talk about freedom of expression and freedom of press and fourth estate, and actually they're much closer to real estate than fourth estate. If you're going to analyze them in those frameworks, you're not going to get far. You analyze them as corporations. That's who they are. That's what they are. Analyze them with the same relentlessness as you analyze other corporations that have come and got into mining and displacing indigenous people. The way you approach those corporations and understand them, do the same. Journalism, there are in the worst newspapers, there are still very good journalists. That's the paradox. But they get fewer and fewer each day. Let me give you an example. In the one and only time I ever saluted the Modi government, I confess to having done so, the one and only time I ever saluted the Modi government was on the night of the eve of the first lockdown, that is March 24th, 8 p.m. 2020. The government of Narendra Modi became the first government in Indian history when it put out a list of essential services, right? It included the media. It included the media in the list of essential services. Now that was very good because it meant you could do your job, right? Now, Essential services have another meaning. What does it mean? It means you're a protected service. It means you have job security. You can't, in the midst of a war, see, the army is an essential service. In the midst of a war, you don't sack half the army. Right? The fire brigade, you don't sack when a city is on fire. That's what the essential service means. And in the next 15-20 months, the corporations owning the media industry in this country sacked 3,500 journalists, violating Mr. Modi's listing of us as an essential service. And Mr. Modi didn't lose much sleep over it. Yeah, 3,500 journalists were sacked. You'll find that in an affidavit of the Delhi Union of Journalists submitted to the Supreme Court, in which the affidavit says these are minimal figures because we don't have journalist unions in many parts of the country anymore. We can't get the accurate figure. Apart from the 3,500 journalists sacked, 10 to 15,000 non-journalist media persons, media workers lost their jobs. Technicians, cameramen, drivers, all of them lost their jobs. I became a member of the Press Council subcommittee. I'm not a member of the Press Council, but of the subcommittee to look into retrenchments during the COVID period. So we took our job seriously, sent out questionnaires to all the big houses, asking them to state, not just how many people they retrenched or threw out. Please tell us about the number of voluntary resignations that took place in this period, because you know exactly how voluntary those were. Yeah. Please let us know of those who took premature retirement. Please let us. We got. Remember, we represented the Press Council, a statutory body. We got rude, even vulgar replies. The Times of India wrote to us saying, "Who the hell are you to ask?" They sent a lawyer's notice, not a reply. Look at the wonderful thing, which is why I'm telling you, make a distinction between media and journalism. The Times of India said, you have no business looking into this. Hire and fire is our issue. You can go to a labor tribunal, whatever you like, but you cannot, a labor tribunal can ask us this, etc., etc. Here's the point. They said that the purview of the Press Council is press freedom, and our recruitment and hiring and firing policies have nothing to do with press freedom. So this is wonderful. That a journalist being sacked and losing his job does nothing to his press freedom, does nothing to his freedom of expression. This is actually what you derive from that statement. There were even more hilarious, this was obscene, but there were some humorous ones also. We found that a lot of newspapers, we will never know actually how many journalists lost their jobs. But by the way, up to August 22, an estimated 720 to 750 journalists died of COVID. And almost all their families are in debt because of paying these were mostly highly underpaid stringers. Okay? 4,000 a month, 3,000 a month. Yeah. And 2 rupees an inch, whatever, like that. And then when they get ill, they're hospitalized, the families take loans from a private money lender to pay the hospital costs. They're unable, the boy dies, girl dies, but the loan of 4 to 6 lakh rupees is there mounting. Then we found that Hindustan Times and some other newspapers had involved a really comical thing to stop having any liability for the journalist. Suppose you are a stringer in, say, Dibrugarh, and you are hired by one of these newspapers, you will sign a letter attached to your letter of seeking appointment. Your letter will say, I am not a professional journalist, nor is it my major source of income, nor is it my vocation. I dabble a bit in journalism as a hobby. So we came to call these people hobby correspondents. Yeah? Uttarakhand I know about 6 of them in Uttarakhand alone. They are hobby correspondents. What happens? Why is that? When I sack you, you get nothing. You're out. No compensation, no pension, no gratuity, no PF, nothing. No severance pay, nothing. I am not responsible for you, though you can slave for me for 2 rupees an inch or whatever it is for that thing. Yeah. Now, is this a problem of money? Oh, not at all. But by the way, now do you understand why I said don't equate media and journalism? Media is what you just heard me describe. Journalism is something India can be proud of. We completed 200 years of Indian-owned journals in 2022 when Raja Ram Mohan Roy's anniversary came up for Miratul Akhbar. Though I always have to break it gently to my Bengali friends that the journal was not in Bengali, it was in Persian. Because Persian was the court language, it was the language of the elite at that time. Yeah. Historically, all the good Brahmins learned whichever court language came to power. Yeah. After the Mughals, then it was the British, and we took to that, right? So now he completed 200. That journal's anniversary, 200th years completed then. I am saying this in those 200 years. There is 150, 160 years that every Indian can be proud of. The kind of journalism that India did. You know, who were your most prolific journalists? There is no match anywhere in the world for their output. 2 of them, Gandhi and Ambedkar, between them had 150 volumes of published collected works. All the journalists in this audience put together might be able to show 5-10 books. Yeah? 2 guys had 150 volumes of collected works. The great journalists of India were among several. There was Gandhi, there was Ambedkar, and most people don't remember this, don't know this, and I'm ashamed to say that even in Punjab, people remember him as the great revolutionary, they remember him as an activist, they remember him as a political person, they remember him as a martyr, but they don't seem to remember that Bhagat Singh was a professional journalist. He earned his living from journalism. And the only journalist I know, not Gandhi, not Ambedkar, anyone else, who wrote independently in 4 languages every week of his life. He did not write in one language and translate into others. He wrote different topics, different issues, different papers in Punjabi, in Akhali magazine. Yeah. He wrote in Veer Pratap. He wrote in Arjun in Hindi. He wrote in English, as you know. He wrote in Urdu prolifically, as many Punjabis of that time did. And by the way, when underground in Kolkata, he learned Bengali and wrote 2 pieces in that. Though, of course, he would probably have been dissuaded by his Bengali friends to, leave that language to us. Yeah, so and then this young man, in the last 270 days in prison, checked out 313 books from the prison library. You'll find them heavily annotated, and learned Persian, his fifth language. All this when he was hanged at the age of 23. By 23, I started journalism. Okay. Now this is the great tradition of Indian journalism. From 60s, something else happens. First, business houses start buying up the freedom paper. Most of your great publications were started by freedom fighters. Kesari, Sakal, whether Tilak, whoever it was, they were started by freedom fighters. By the 60s, 70s, they were owned by small or medium business houses. By the 80s, they began to get corporatized. And this is the central point I want to make to you, because it's not different from academia and it's not different from research. Everything today, whether academia, research or media, are corporate controlled and corporate driven and driven by corporate profit. Just to tell you, in case you're surprised by what I'm saying about academia, and let me tell you that all your great academic publications, journalists, are giant corporations. Elsevier, the largest Elsevier, by the way, owns Lancet. It owns Scopus journals. Yeah, it owns about 100 academic publications, journals. Elsevier's pre-tax profit in 2023, the last year for which data are available, Elsevier's pre-tax profit was 2.3 billion UK pounds sterling, or 2.9 billion US dollars. And you know that they have now spawned, they've spawned the entire business of pay and publish. Many of the academic journals, you pay and publish. So because you have to get your so many APIs for your assistant to associate professor, right? Tell me about it. Huh? So you have all this stuff to do. Springer, by the way, which found its origins from Axel Springer, a very shady character in Germany. But then two sets. There is the Springer company based in New York by Germans who emigrated, and there is the Springer Science, which also includes Nature. All the scientific journals of the world are corporate owned. What gets published will be what. Oh, by the way, another thing. Most of the research that they publish is public funded. It's public funded. You guys do it at NESRC. You submit it to them. They publish a book, and they sell that back to the university and the government. They're taking your public funded research, which you have done in public motive, with public motivation. They take your research and they get it peer reviewed. I love this thing, peer review. It's like saying let's take, they're getting everything done for free. It's like saying I was in Hindu and Samudra was in Indian Express. It's like saying that Samudra and I would edit and exchange and scrutinize and review each other's articles and journalism. Yeah? And then if the publisher gets it free. Right? If the publisher gets it free. So this is what your Elsevier, your Springer, and your great journals, there are independent ones. There is Oxford University. Yeah, there are certain public spirited ones. But by the way, a lot of the public spirited ones are today corporate owned. In the last 20 years, that transition has taken place. Now let me give you an idea Has anyone a number on what is the financial market value of media in India today? By the way, the industry is always referred to as in two words because it is two industries. It's media and entertainment. Media and entertainment because that's the nature of the beast. Yeah. So, and in India, as you know, there is a very serious, I mean, we'll get to that bit later. The media and entertainment industry, the only listing of it each year comes from Ernst & Young. You know E&Y, Ernst & Young, the services and analysis company, etc., like Deloitte or Dalberg or Standard & Poor, that sort of a thing. Ernst & Young tells me that, tells you because it's up there on the net, it tells you that on March 31st, 2024, the Indian media entertainment industry was worth 2.32 trillion rupees. Trillion is 12 zeros followed. Your 12 followed by 8 zeros, that is 120 crores. The Indian media and entertainment sector was worth now this is a serious underestimate because companies like E&Y are looking at listed companies. They will not be covering the journal that the NESRC might put out. Huh? It's not a listed company, so Assam Tribune's value will not be incorporated there. So I'm not clear exactly how they've done it, but it's clear to me that the bulk of it has to be listed companies, because how the hell do you source information on, Tripura, Azad or whatever, how the heck do you get the value of it? But 2.32 trillion. Now here's the wonderful thing. In March 2024, the value was 2.32 trillion. Almost overnight, some weeks later, the value went to 3.4 trillion. How? A single media owner, Mukesh Bhai, presided over an $8.5 billion, by the way, $2.32 trillion was worth 28.5 billion US dollars when the rupee still had some meaning. And then by February he concluded a deal, and by March data was revealed in October, but actually it was a merger. And you guys should know this, all of you who watch streaming output. You know, you're all familiar with streaming, I don't need to explain that. He merged Jio Cinema with Disney Hotstar. It was an 8.5 billion merger and gives Mukesh Ambani's Jio Hotstar control of 50% of all streaming in India. 50% of all streaming in India, and maybe an obscene number of channels. Now, even before that merger, Mukesh Bhai was the richest man in India forever, and also the biggest owner of media. You know, do you have an ETV Assamese? No. But you've heard of ETV. ETV founded by Ramoji Rao in Andhra Pradesh, Eenadu TV, the biggest newspaper in Andhra Pradesh. He then started the most widely dispersed media network in India, ETV Marathi, ETV Bengali, you can watch ETV Hindi, ETV. Now everybody thinks, wow, what a wonderful thing that is. A regional group doing that. Except for the 5 Telugu channels. All the other 19 channels of ETV are owned by Mukesh Ambani. And he bought them 15-20 years ago in a wonderful institution, a wonderfully named institution called Independent Media Trust. Yeah. Completely independent of anything, of any rational belief system. Right. So that is the thing. Now you're talking about a man who already had value of about 20-25% of the total value of Indian media estimated. See, Mukesh Bhai doesn't know the names of all the channels he owns. I could perhaps help him, but I don't think he'd be keen on that. But now this guy already owned some, he was already the biggest media owner, and then the media value goes up 31% overnight with that single deal. Just imagine what share of the media one individual is controlling. This is in 2010, the Delhi Union of Journalists held a meeting. I had a lecture to felicitate me when I completed 30 years in journalism. It's now 45, by the way. And when someone was asking me about Ambani, and I said, just be a little careful, guys, they were all journalists. I said, in 10 years' time, we could all be working for Ambani. Yeah? And it does not seem to have been terrible. But of course, now Mr. Adani has put his shoe in the door with the purchase of NDTV and Bloomberg Quint, and is on. It's on. You can see how the media have performed. By the way, the growth of this incredible inequality in ownership of media is a reflection of the growth of inequality in Indian society. The growth of ridiculous research topics and research subjects is a reflection of the growth of inequality. When I was in JNU in the late 70s, doing my MPhil PhD that I never completed, most of the people doing PhDs, 1 in every 2 or 3 was doing it on poverty, eradication of poverty, or they were doing it on land alienation, land reform. This 1 out of every 3 PhD topics that I was aware of, whether in the bloody political sciences or history or economics, was about land. Yeah. When I go back in 2005 as the Executive Council of JNU. I claim the distinction of being the only student ever to have been rusticated and placed on the Executive Council of the same university. Yeah. So, which I was in 78, by the way. And this time, half the PhDs were about microfinance, SHGs, development models, yeah, and so many of the academics elsewhere that I was encountering were doing consultancies for World Bank, for IMF, on economics, and many of them were doing consultancies on how to move towards policies for freeing up land for development. I mean, look, that was what a period of 80 I left JNU, 80 to 2005, in a quarter of a century, as old as NESRC, that universe had changed. What was being researched, what would be researched, what What is it that we will do with research? Anyway, but let me give you about what that inequality, a picture of that inequality in your society. Yeah, I don't have the time. I'm not going into the different dimensions, very obviously crucial dimensions of inequality, such as gender inequality or caste inequalities. These are terrible. But I'm just going to give you a central economic pillar of inequality and maybe quote for you from what, the finest speech ever made on inequality in this country was made on November 25th, 1949 by Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the last speech in the Constituent Assembly when he handed over the draft constitution to the representatives of the assembly and said, I give you this document in great trepidation. Today we have entered a world of paradoxes. In politics, there is equality. In society and economics, there is no equality. And one day, the tensions of inequality in society and economics can implode the fine edifice of this constitution, the political freedom and political democracy. There is democracy in politics, but no democracy in society and economics. I don't need to say anything more because you're already connecting it with where we are today. I can see that. Yeah? You can see which way we were going. Now, I'm going to look at that single democracy in economics for today. In 1991, the year we embarked on our brave new neoliberal journey, there was not a single dollar billionaire in India, not one. At least if there was, he was very modest about it. 96th appearance comes up on the Forbes list, the Forbes billionaires list, my favorite website, forbesbillionaires.com. I look at it every week. They do a daily live update. So I can know how many cents Mukesh Bhai has lost or gained. And you connect it to the events around you, to the world around us. Look at what happened. In 1991, $0 billionaires. January 1, 2025. Happy New Year. We have $211 billionaires, the third highest ranking nation in the world in dollar billionaires. 211. And as of January 11, their combined cumulative net worth was $1,049 billion. We're talking $1 trillion here. We're talking about 211 Indians worth over $1 trillion. Okay? And in a country which together with two neighbors accounts for more than half the world's hungry people. We're talking about a country that ranks third on the Forbes Billionaires Index and ranks 132 in the United Nations Human Development Index, ranks 178 out of 180 in the Environmental Performance Index of Columbia and Yale universities, ranks 159 in the World Press Freedom Index, ranks 107 out of 125 in the Global Hunger Index, ranks 126 out of 145 in the Gender Inequality Index, but ranks third in the number of billionaires in the world. By the way, it's the only index that the government of India does not refute or attack. Everything else is a conspiracy. People are jealous of us. 180 nations in the world, they have nothing else to do but build conspiracies to defame India. That's all they do. You know, how jealous they are of all of us. So, I mean, it's quite terrible. So you, now, the way this flows over into research, into coverage, into everything. One is, when you're a corporate, you will do what brings you revenue. Why should I cover you? Am I making money out of it? That's not what I'm here for. You know, I'm a media malik. I'm not Mother Teresa. Okay? Nor are we the Boy Scouts. I mean, we're here to make money. So you make money. Now, just to show you two things. In the spectrum of India, when I joined journalism, September 20th, 1980, every newspaper in this country had a labor correspondent and an agriculture correspondent. Every newspaper had a labor correspondent. Find me one now. There is no full-time labor correspondent or labor and employment correspondent anywhere. At the time when I was telling Walter that the Statesman Kolkata had a retired general who was covering golf full-time. Okay, I think it was Statesman, yes. Now, the statistical negligibility of golf in the Indian population is beyond my mathematical ability to calculate. So I'll spare you that agony. Yeah, there is not a single correspondent on full-time working on poverty, rural or urban. There is not a single correspondent working full-time on homelessness, rural or urban. There is not a single correspondent on by the way, there is not even today, though there will be, because money is coming into that sector, there is not a single full-time correspondent on climate crisis and change. Okay? But we have newspapers that have general newspapers, not even business newspapers. The business desk of a general newspaper has 12 full-time guys covering business, various aspects. Merchant banking, investment banking, stock exchange. I had a friend whose only job for many years was to cover futures. Now, we used to have a lot of fun trying to understand the word future. You know, it was being redefined there. Futures are, you're betting on the price of a commodity, so much time from now, whatever. Now just imagine you're a journalist, a reporter. You're born, if you're hardwired DNA as a reporter, you're someone who wants to go out and find something, write about it, connect to society, and you're covering futures. It must have been a miserable job, but he was earning 6 times what I did. So I guess he was okay with it. So the average Indian national daily, the front page of the average national daily allocates 0.67% of its front page editorial space to news of rural origin. What's the percentage of rural population? 69%, as by the 2011 Census of India. So you're giving on the front page 0.67% of the coverage to news of 69% of the population. And by the way, that's a 5-year average and an exaggeration, because in those 5 years, 1 year is an election year. So then percentage of front route, those guys have the votes value. So you cover rural India 12%, 13% on the front page, and it gives you an average of 0.67%. If I remove the election year and looked at all the data from Center for Media Studies, N. Bhaskara Rao's CMS, the oldest media studies institution in India, it came to 0.18 to 0.24% coverage. Now, what happens then on the inside pages? Crime and entertainment combined get more than all the social sector portfolios together. Housing, education, development, whatever. It all gets. Crime and entertainment are the overarching areas of coverage. And as you know, in India, crime and entertainment have a heavy overlap. I mean, why do we have 200 TV cameras at the court when Salman Khan appears for his black buck case? Are we so passionately loving the black buck? Yeah? Or are we so concerned about crime? And the poaching crime? No, we care, or do we care about Salman the criminal, or are we there because Salman the entertainer, the entertainment? Yeah, crime and entertainment get more space than the rest of all that we do put together. Then you had also in the meantime, other things are happening to journalism. For one thing, we are getting killed in larger numbers. More than half the 28 journalists who have died in the last, since 2014, in the last 10 years, more than half of them were covering stories of land seizures, illegal mining, land displacement, and environmental issues like sand mafia, sand mining. More than half the journalists murdered. Who are these journalists? I'm just coming here via Mumbai from paying tribute to one of those young journalists. You might have read about Mukesh Chandrakar in Bastar, who was murdered by a group of contractors gang, was murdered by that. He was 32. Like many journalists from professional media houses writing for the newspapers, he's moved to YouTube. YouTube is now where media refugees go. Yeah, he's murdered, and he's 32. Okay, for me, that's a young boy. He's 32. All these journalists, 14 of those 28 journalists, and actually it's a lot more. I won't go into the. What happens is, if you go by Wikipedia, it is 44 since year 2000 and 63 since 1992. But that doesn't take into account a lot of people whom we consider journalists, but they are not employed by big major remember the murder of Govind Pansare, M.M. Kalburgi, Narendra Dabholkar. They were all prolific writers in the media. They were prolific columnists. Then Gauri Lankesh gets listed because she was, in their understanding, a professional journalist. And of course she was. Many of this kind of person has not been counted. So you'll reach a much more incredible number. But that's one thing that's happened. The second thing is that the best journalists are the ones who are getting laid off, because they tend to not want to do whatever they're told to do. They want to do good stories. Guys, just look at one thing. Have you ever seen in this past 45 days any serious analysis of the scope, scale and impact of what's happening at the Mahakumbh Mela? I'll just give you one little thing. Now, obviously, it's the biggest event ever in our history. There's no doubt about it. But you don't, incidentally, I think the biggest sacrifice made is the Ganga. But never mind that. Let's take a thing. I'm going just by the government figures, and you find me why the major newspapers, channels don't raise simple questions. The temporary city. The government has published obligingly all its numbers. It says 4,000 acres created the temporary city with parking for 150,000 vehicles at one time, with a tents, with a 150,000 tents, all these things, and they constructed 39 bathing ghats in addition to the 9-10 which have always been there. So you're talking about 40-50 bathing ghats. They also published a figure day before yesterday saying 66 crore, 660 million human beings have taken a dip. Now, I think you need a supercomputer. You don't need a supercomputer to do the math. Now let's say to walk into that water, yeah, have your dip, walk out of the water, would it take you 3 minutes? When you're seeing it on TV, that's taking a lot more than 3 minutes. But let's say that everybody was only permitted 3 minutes. Or just calculate how many minutes that takes and calculate how many years it would take for 66 crore people to have a day. Yeah, I mean, see this simple, you see the death of skepticism is the death of journalism. And no one is saying that this is not a mega event. I know it is. I know I've been affected by it while traveling in Bastar. There were no cars to hire because they'd all gone to the Mahakumbh. It's a gigantic event. But any number, now get to what's happening in research, in many of the things that are happening in research, for instance. Look, there are many great things we are doing. I am, for one, very admiring of ISRO's Mangalyaan mission. I think it's a great achievement that India could become only the third country to put a vehicle in orbit around Mars. One. Two, if you read the ISRO's website, it lists primary science objectives of the mission. And it's a very important mission. And one of the objectives which caught my eye was it is to study the concentration of methane in the Martian atmosphere, if it exists. If methane exists in the Martian atmosphere, to study the concentration of methane, which, by the way, methane is A, poisonous gas, B, UN Environmental Program lists methane as one of the most major drivers of climate change. So I say ISRO is doing the right thing. It's a good program. Yeah, but I also asked, in the last 10 years, 373 Government of India figure given in the Rajya Sabha question and answer, 373 Dalit manual scavengers have died of methane poisoning in the sewers and septic tanks of this country. The National SC/ST Commission and the National Commission for Dalit Human Rights, they give much higher figures. But let's accept the 373 figure. Their deaths are caused by concentration of methane gas in those septic tanks and sewers. 75 years we haven't thought of doing a study of methane concentration. Don't we have the tech to do it? Don't we boast being the software superpower superior to California, and California depends on us and all that stuff, though that's getting sorted out at this moment. And yeah, so I'm saying, what do we research? Why do we research it? And how do we research it? I am saying that journalists and researchers have some things to learn from each other. And I think that researchers have this to learn, the application of skepticism to that. I have this argument. If I keep asking my friends, primarily the leading economists whom I know, have you guys ever met the person on the ground who puts your data together? Now take the Indian census for instance. I think it's one of the greatest documents in the world. On aggregate, the many errors get left out because undercounting in one area is offset by double counting in another area. But when you disaggregate the data and you come to tribes and tribals, it goes haywire. Like the Birhors. Let me tell you, the Birhors, you know, there are about 4,000, 3,000 Birhors. Birhors, the name comes from Bir and Ho. Bir is forest, Ho is people. People of the forest. There's probably less than 3,000 of them now. The Birhors are a nomadic people, okay, and they had this triangle between what is today Chhattisgarh, which used to be Madhya Pradesh, and even now they come via Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Bihar, they move. Now in different parts, they used to be called different things. They used to, till Pandit B.D. Sharma came and sorted it out, they were listed as 3 different tribes. They were listed as Birhor, they were listed as Mankhidi, and they were listed as Mankhidian. They were monkey trappers. You know? Then B.D. Sharma pointed out that they are the one and same tribe. Yeah. And in the next census, their numbers were joined and their numbers doubled. Government of Odisha put out a press release claiming the success of its programs in averting extinction to the Birhors. The government of Odisha's thoughtful programs saved the Birhors. All that happened was a recalculation mathematically in the ministry. So, I mean, this, when you disaggregate in the census, you're in trouble. I mean, especially when it comes to the PVTGs. When it comes to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, when it comes to the Adivasi groups in general, you get into a lot. I stayed, when I asked, in one time I stayed with a census enumerator, a good Pandit Ji Tiwari in Palamu. The Birhors were camped outside, they're in Palamu, they were one of their camps, one of their staging areas. They were there. He didn't want to go. I told him, Tiwari, I'm going myself to interview them. Why don't you do this work there, the sheets that you're filling in? He sat with the Upasarpanch of the village, another good Pandit, and between them made lists with names. Every Adivasi female gets a Devi to her name. Every Adivasi male got a Ram to his name. Okay, that Sarpanch said that he thinks there are 26 households, 27 households. That became the number. You know, I asked him, let's go there. You know what he actually told me, sir? Professor Kaka, you will love this. He said, वो लोग बिरो आदमी का मांस खाते हैं. Which is a story you also heard about the Bondas, right? So this complete, in other ways, mind you, the guy was a good teacher, he looked after his children, his students, but he had these deep-rooted prejudices. Yeah? And all of that enters your data and your thing. Then we are also masters in research of creating fantasy data. In Madhya Pradesh, when the Digvijay government was there, they called me up one day to say, you have to visit Jabua, you have to visit these 2 blocks. We have worked out a water calculation, rainfall data system that is perfect. And we are allocating the water budgets, the water resources budget on this. Other states are coming to study our system. I got excited. Next day, caught a train, went to Jaipur. Now here, this is India. The officer who was generating the data was not corrupt. He was an honest fellow. And I spoke to him and he gave me a very good this thing of how he did the data, how he collated the data, and etc. etc. And we asked him, I had been tipped off by someone else, I have to say that, who went there before me. And I asked him, tell me one thing, all this excellent data, how is it that you compiled such excellent rainfall data when not a single rain gauge is working in your block for the last 3 years? He did not deny anything. He got up and he brought 2 files. One thin file and one slightly thicker file. The thicker file was of his appeals to the government, to the block office, to Bhopal. Dear sir, please to note, rain gauge is not working in my block. Please let us have the rain gauges replaced. He got no replies to this, but the thin file was full of notes saying, it has been noted with concern that you have not filed your rainfall data as per due date. Kindly do so. And the last one of the messages says, we will start disciplinary proceedings against whatever. So I said, so then you cooked it up? He said, no sir, I did not cook up anything. I asked him then how did, he had a very valid, very solid answer, though it will not work today in the period of climate change. He said, sir, blocks are administrative. They are not geographical units. They are not natural physical units. A block is an administrative unit. The neighboring blocks have the same rainfall pattern as our blocks. And he said, looking at the district statistical handbook and the gazetteer of the district, I was so impressed to meet a fellow who actually read the gazetteer for the historic figures. And he said, as you know, that it shows me no secular decline. The data shows no secular decline in the rainfall. So I averaged out the data of the other blocks and I put this figure. Now the big problem with this was that all the other blocks were constructing their data averaging his figures. And not one of them had working rain gauges either. So a whole district was producing fantasy data. Skepticism in research. I'll start pulling this together, isn't it? So the thing is that if you are looking for, I was saying the inequalities in your society, and then I'll tell you what I think we can do. The inequalities in your society are reflected in your elections. And they are reflected in every house of parliament that you have. Let me give you you remember that in 2004, we started an affidavit. Remember, Walter, an affidavit, self-statement of your financial worth. Even allowing for the modesty that such questions produce, 30% of the 2004 Lok Sabha, 30% were self-declared crorepati's. In 2009, I'm giving you all numbers from ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms, which all of you see anyway. In 2009, the number of crorepati's in the Lok Sabha was 58%. In 2014, it was 82%. In 2019, it was 88%. In 2024, it is 93%, which means of the 543 MPs in Lok Sabha, all but 39 are declared crorepati's. About half the rest will be undeclared crorepati's, but never mind. This is good enough for you. 93%. Now, these are the people who are going to represent some of the poorest human beings on planet Earth. Yeah. What are we researching? Should we be looking at the link between the represented and the representative? How that is working out? How it is working in our electoral systems? That's what. Then by the way, I said that $211 billionaires. You know, when I say that their wealth is 1,049 billion, that's 27% of your gross domestic product. What is 211 individuals in your population? 0.000015%. And this concentration of wealth, Thomas Piketty's World Inequality Report tells us, is greater than seen in the British Raj in 1921. And there's another interesting angle to that wealth. The World Inequality Lab report says over 90% of this, about 90% of this billionaire wealth is held by upper castes. And you can just have to take a look at it to know the gender inequality in it as well. The women who figure in that list are the grand dames of the big industrial houses. You know, like the Ambani mother was that way listed. The Hindu Jain of the Bennett, Coleman and Co. was listed because the company's main wealth was in her name. But this is it. No society can indefinitely sustain those kinds of inequalities. You can't. Yeah? No society. And we are not sustaining it. Many of the troubles, the rise of fundamentalism, the rise of violence, the incredible communal polarizations, and I'm not talking just about Hindu-Muslim, though that's the major one. Just seeing something else in Manipur. These are, without a doubt in my mind, linked to the incredible inequalities deepening in Indian society. So that's another thing. And by the way, how do the media respond? They don't, because they are beneficiaries of that growing inequality. Look, you know, when in 2000, 2005, we all got very excited. Internet is liberating. It's a liberating force. Actually, the digital monopolies are the greatest monopolies in human history. And watch how all they line up to surrender on their knees before Trump. Yeah? Musk is Trump's mini-me. And Zuckerberg, you know, whom we gave us, 4-hour session in IIT Delhi as a sort of role model for our young IIT kids. Yeah. Zuckerberg and is apologizing profusely to Trump, giving a $28 million. Jeff Bezos is giving a $28 million gift to Melania Trump's charity. Jeff Bezos is the owner of Amazon, who also owns the Washington Post. All the institutions that you thought was, understand one thing, the anchors on TV, the editors who speak on these panels, they appear to us to be very powerful people. And they are, as long as they are on the side of the powerful. The media appears powerful when they are hand in glove with the powerful. When they move away from that, then you have to, where 1 in 1,000 can build that independent audience like a Ravish Kumar does, because he was always independent. Inside that organization or outside it, Ravish Kumar is independent. So when he went, he took his audience with him. Many instead cave in and cater to the audience that the management required. So I can replace you with someone else. It's not difficult. There are so many clones waiting to take your place. And 3,500 of us lose their jobs. Right? So this is in a nutshell your media picture. Finally, there is the engagement. And that is, what do we do? The first thing is, I think that as journalists, I want to reclaim the legacy of the Indian press in the freedom struggle. What an astonishing bunch of people they were. You remember that Gandhi was not always a Mahatma. He earned a living as a journalist after giving up a lucrative practice in London, where in 1913 he was earning 15,000 pounds a year. That was a hell of a lot of money. As an Ambedkar, you had to go back. You didn't, when you were one of these guys, you didn't know which day you'd go and find your press shut down, locked out, or electricity cut off, or whatever. Because that's what the British Raj was want to do. I have a more recent book called The Last Heroes, The Last Freedom Fighters Alive. On April 26th, one of them will turn 100. The youngest is 98, the oldest is 105. All articulate people, but more than half of them have died since the book was published in November, end of November 2022. And one of them was a journalist, the only graduate. None of the other, there were others who were illiterate, whatever, never seen a school. H.S. Doraiswamy had that attitude towards journalism, that attitude towards responsibility to society. He was running a newspaper, H.S. Doraiswamy, in Bangalore, where you have spent so many years. H.S. Doraiswamy was part of the Mysore Chalo movement. That is, to force the Maharaja of Mysore to merge with the Indian Republic. And the Diwan of Mysore was after all journalists who were saying this. So they would shut down the newspaper. H.S. Doraiswamy, so excited as if it was yesterday, telling me this at age 102. He took his newspaper across the border and registered it in British territory, which is Anantapur, today in Rayalaseema region of Andhra Pradesh. Now he goes to the collector and gets permission to register his newspaper. He registers one newspaper with 6 different names. Okay, People's Voice, People's Choice, People's Guardian, People's Champion. Okay, when they shut down one, exactly the same newspaper appears the next day. People's Choice becomes People's Voice, or People's Guardian becomes People's Champion. And the same writers, the same content. I learned later that there were several Indian journalist editors who did this. Show me that kind of courage now. Yeah? I'm saying we need to reclaim the media does not belong to big business. It belongs to the Indian people. The legacy of the Indian champions, the Indian corporate leaders, their legacy is not the legacy of the freedom struggle. In 1857, what you are today pleased to call your first war of independence, while the pathetic little journals, underground journals of the time were proscribed, the corporate champions, the big business houses of Bombay and Calcutta in those days, held public prayers outside Asiatic Society, all these places, praying for the success of the British troops. That's who your great corporate families were with. Who fought when Bal Gangadhar Tilak was sentenced to 6 years in Mandalay prison? It was not the Godreges and the business houses of Mumbai, Bombay that came out on the streets, it was the textile workers, the illiterate textile workers. They could not read Tilak. They had him read out to them. People with no literacy came out to protect journalists who they believed were speaking, giving a voice to those who did not have one. That is the legacy of Indian journalism. It belongs to the Indian masses. It's today kabzad, it's in the kabza of the corporate world. We need to liberate it. One. Two, we need to, everybody needs to support the vigorous but struggling alternative independent media efforts in this country, whether a wire or a frontline or these people have no money. They put it, I mean, many independent media journals, including my own, we put our own money to serve you. By the way, the People's Archive of Rural India, unlike any other, we don't have a subscription fee. We don't carry advertising because we believe there is enough advertising and enough channels selling enough crap to young people which they don't need. We don't take government funds. Not that this government will ever give us a fund, but we don't take government funds even when any other government is in power. We don't take direct corporate funds. We don't have an FCRA. We don't even apply for one. I know what would happen if we had one. Yeah. So, I mean, the first year we thought about it, and then we are seeing all the people with FCRAs, as you all know, how much they are suffering. Cancellation, laying off people. We didn't. You know. We work on random donations. Some of you can have a card of the thing. We work on volunteer labor. Yeah, and we are publishing every day in 15 languages. And we are not just, we don't break news with, we think the news is broken. We think the news media are broken. We cover the everyday lives of everyday people. And how much, Walter, I enjoyed sitting with your team from NLAC this morning, because there is so much convergence between what Vijay and his team are doing and what we are doing in Pari, because languages, we believe Indian languages are at the soul of the Indian countryside, the soul of rural India. Rural India is the most complex part of planet Earth. 780 languages, 8 of them spoken by more than 50 million people. 5 of them spoken by more than, 5 of them spoken by more than 80 million people. 8 of them spoken by more than 50 million people, right down to small tribal languages with 8,000, 9,000, 6,000 speakers. The last speaker of Jeru in Andamans died 5 years ago. There are just 2 speakers in Tripura left of the language called Saimar, which has a faint Khmer origin, but it's not equivalent to Kasi. The independent media are trying to build, see, the mainstream or corporate media, as I call them, they have built an unreal alternative universe. You can choose to be with that, or you can choose to be with the efforts that try building the universe as we know it, with a fast changing universe where we capture the everyday lives of everyday people. Dayanita Singh, the great photographer, once addressing an audience like yours, a very large one in Chennai, she asked them, how many photographers in this audience? Being Chennai, about 20 hands went up. And she said, wrong answer. There were about 1,800 people in the audience. She said, let me ask you again. How many of you own a cell phone with a camera? Every hand went up. She said, that's many. That's how many photographers there are. We need to take journalism, reclaim it, We need to reclaim the republic. We need to reclaim its journalism. We need to take it back from the hands of the corporations. We need also to fight for diversity in journalism. We need to fight for a law to entrench diversity in media. Even in the United States, there are cross-ownership laws which says you cannot be the only guy in town owning the only newspaper in town, the only TV station in town, the only portal, the only radio station in town. Of course, those laws have been torn down from the Reagan time onwards, but they existed. We do not have a single law against monopoly, and that's the final point. If you cannot break and fight monopoly, and in our time, the challenge we confront is corporate monopoly, whether it's agriculture, media, academia, education. If you cannot fight off corporate monopoly, if you cannot fight for breakup and dissolution of monopolies. Remember that the United States once broke Standard Oil into 12 companies. When they realized the House of Rockefeller was more powerful than the White House, they broke it. As at some point it will happen with Elon Musk. But the thing is, if you cannot fight for destruction of monopoly, and then you also need to fight for the revival and resurgence of the public broadcasters. Yeah? And the same principles apply in how do you liberate research from institutions which are completely, commandeered by corporations. The agricultural universities of this country once were close to the community. I was telling your friends in NLAC this morning, in 1978, I was standing in the Punjabi Agricultural University, Ludhiana. I was a student in JU with my friends there, outside the veterinary department, and this huge Sardar, 6 feet tall with another 6 inches of turban, walks into the campus, walks down the corridor, in tow, a huge bull, as big as the Sardar. And he comes to the veterinary department and tells the faculty, बंदा तबीयत तो बिल्कुल खराब है इसका, बंदा is the bull, करो तो कुछ. And 100% marks to the faculty. They got up and treated the animal. They brought out some very primitive looking, frightful looking instruments which looked like they were last used in the Spanish Inquisition. but they treated the animal. Both parties understood one thing, that the university was the property of the community. It belonged to the community. The Sardar farmer saw that. He demanded that it serves him. They understood that it was their job to serve it. Today, in no agriculture university that I visit, I see a farmer within a mile's distance. That we need to reclaim our institutions. It's never been easy. It has been done. It won't be easy, because what you're fighting for is a democratization of media. You're fighting for a democratization of the digital. Yeah? It's never been easy. It has been done. It won't be easy. It will be done. Thank you.
The theme was the media and the marginalized, journalism, research and engagement. And what a wonderful, charming talk that was, 1.5 hours long. We do live in a time of gaping, widening disparities, and things we encounter, they border on being from bizarre to ridiculous. So what we take away as young researchers from this talk is, we need to look at serious issues, but there's always space for some humor. I know we have friends, we have journalist friends and a lot of admirers of Mr. Sainath. So I think we open the floor for some questions and discussion. So whoever wants to talk to him or has comments or suggestions or wants to discuss something can raise their hands and I'll take this mic to them.
Factor that comes to it. I think during the independence movements, a group was strong and an individual can merge with the group and then disappear in the group, as it were. He can go underground. Today, it's virtually impossible. The state can reach your, not only you reach your individual lives, also your family. With the and make you economically dead with the Aadhaar linked Aadhaar and everything linked to everything. So how in this new reality, how does one resist and still survive?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very, very difficult question. Not only can they reach, they have reached. They have reached, and they are actually there are all kinds of pressures. But the key lies in what you said about a group, the collective strength. One of the things your media never told you, though they covered it in the worst possible way, in the most limited way, your media never told you that the greatest struggle for justice in the world, organized at the height of the pandemic, was the Kisan Andolan at the gates of Delhi, where 100,000 people gathered. Now you compare that with the most publicized struggle for justice, which also a struggle I supported, Occupy Wall Street in 2011 or 2009, Occupy Wall Street, where a few thousand young people, many of them young techies, and by the way, young techies are the most prolific contributors of volunteer labor to PARI, to People's Archive of Rural India. So these few thousand young people occupied Zuccotti Park in Wall Street, New York. The park owner, it's a private park, the park owner was sympathetic to them. He didn't ask for them to be evicted or thrown out. But the mayor of New York said, after 9 weeks, he said, throw out the dirt bags. In 6-7 hours, they cleared the park. NYPD cleared the park in a few hours. Your farmers lasted 54 weeks. Occupy Wall Street lasted 9. 100,000 people lasted 54 weeks. 720 farmers died in that 1 year of COVID, of being hit with water cannon. 80-year-old Sardar dies because after he's hit with icy cold water in braving Delhi's worst winter in 40 years, worst summer in 10 years, horrible monsoon, and they died of various things, but 720 is the list we have of people who died in that thing. They were met with severe force. You know, at one point I was speaking there, and I said that I haven't seen this, I don't see this kind of mobilization on the LAC with China, which I see here. Kilometers of concertina wire, barbed wire that opens out like an accordion, things like that. So they showed us the meaning of the word resistance. The government had to budge. Second, your point is that yes, we live in the era worldwide of this surveillance state. And the state is incredibly more sophisticated than it was in the time of classic colonialism. Again, I'm saying, when people band together to defend their constitution. What am I asking people to do? I'm asking you to defend your constitution. Remember, it made me very proud in 2019 when thousands of, some of them teenaged college students, stood at the gates of their college and read out from the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Justice for all, social, economic, political. I cried. My students were there in hundreds. And though I also told them, yeah, there are a few more pages worth reading. You know, don't stop with that only. But there is a direct line from the freedom struggle to these struggles. Yeah? Because they are essentially democratic in nature. They are essentially for the nation, for the larger good, for the larger society, for the marginalized. So I think that we have been shown in the last 5 years that there is also intellectual resistance, what Chomsky calls intellectual self-defense. I think we'll find our way. Yeah?
Good evening and thank you for the lecture, sir. I don't know how my question will make sense or will it not, but I will try my best to convey. The stories which you told us, if I take the example of Bhagat Singh, what they did, and a lot of freedom fighters, what they did was completely different. Today, when a student or children goes to school, they have this aspiration that they have to do something for themselves. They have a societal pressure, and throughout when they reach the college, it's mostly about the individual, how far that person can go. So our professions like journalist, where the income is so less and it takes a lot from that person individually also, and are they differently hardwired, or is it their aspiration? What is it that makes them different?
I think a lot of what you're saying is absolutely true. But I think you need to contextualize what has happened. What you're saying, there's nothing you've said that I can dispute. By the way, you should know, millions of children in this country still respond to the name Bhagat Singh. Yeah, it's the spirit of Bhagat Singh, not the armed revolution. It's the spirit of Bhagat Singh, of not caving in. One. Two, what you've said is also true. And by the way, that's why I did a book on the last living freedom fighters, because of the kind of situation we are in today. To show you the kind of spirit they had and hopefully rekindle that in other generations. But you're right, the situation then evoked a particular kind of response. You were fighting to throw out the foreign ruler. You know, one thing I learned from the freedom fighters in that book, the hundreds I interviewed and 16 I profiled. They taught me the difference between independence and freedom. That these two things are not the same. On April 26th, I'll be attending the 100th birthday of Shobharam Geharwar, a self-declared Gandhian Ambedkarite, a self-declared Gandhian who was making bombs at age 11, and dissident congressman, and also part of the revolutionary underground. They were open to ideas, they were open-minded. When I asked him how did he choose between Gandhi and Ambedkar, he ticked me off. He said, who are you to tell me that I should choose? I choose what I choose. Those principles of the Mahatma I respect, I follow those. Those principles of Baba Sahib I respect, I follow those. Who are you to tell me to choose? Okay? And he made a mockery of all the arguments we have today in those two lines. Right? And now, the thing is also that The big changes are that it's called capitalism. Okay, atomizing the individual. From 91, we very consciously built a universe. These are not problems of Mr. Modi, nor of the BJP government, nor of the past 10 years. From 50s, we ignored the land issue. We did not go in for the land reforms that people had fought for. The end of zamindari, redistribution of land. And from 91, we started doing the reversals of whatever had been done. You built a universe where we have atomized the individual. So that's why the kid going to school or college is thinking about himself and herself. The price of not fighting that, the task is, how do we rebuild community? How do we rebuild the collective? The price of not doing that, I'll tell you one of the most important things about media today in the world. Do you know what was every year Oxford Dictionary puts out a word of the year. You know that, Oxford Dictionary every year. What is the word of the year this year? Brain rot. The word of the internet last year was doom scrolling. So brain rot is now a recognized medical condition that studies from Harvard Medical School, from King's College London, and from one of the medical colleges of Oxford have declared that there is serious deterioration in cognitive power from endless use of these small devices, and which you are constantly scrolling with your thumb. Some of the kids I know, I think that in their sleep they will be doing this. And that's what's called doom scrolling. So this endless, unless you can get them out of that. I'll tell you how countries are dealing with it. In 2009, Sweden, one of the most educated societies in the world, Sweden switched completely to digital stuff. Sweden withdrew textbooks. They withdrew textbooks from the classroom. They withdrew textbooks from the child's burden. In 2016, Sweden reverses its order and 2022, Sweden, after 12 years, has reintroduced formal textbooks and done away with digital devices in the classroom. They said, let them do that at home. But in the classroom, you guys are going to use textbooks. Sweden, its own surveys and UNESCO surveys showed a fall in cognitive reading recognition abilities of the most educated group of children in all of Europe, which probably means, in that sense of education, the most educated children in the world, the most advanced educational system. The Swedes have always been. They have considered the damage they saw serious enough to reverse it. We are going to have that debate here on, by the way, I used to hate book fests, lit fests and stuff. Nowadays I go to them. If, however bad they are, in the hope of getting people to read books. I think we are going to have, and by the way, the damage online education did in COVID, it simply meant that millions of poor Indian children had no education at all for 2 years. I asked reporters in Pari, when they declared Byju's, the great, Byju was a household name. Now he'll probably be a name on the Interpol list in a while. But Byju's, whose value doubled, trebled, quadrupled, Byju's, we were so praising him, and our leaders told the world, we have shown the world how to do online education. I asked our reporters in Pari, I want you to go to an Adivasi dominated area. In Maharashtra, it's called Palghar district, used to be part of the larger Thane district, which is also Adivasi dominated. I said your task is to find me how many Adivasi girls 18 years and below have their own smartphone. They spent days and came back with a figure of 0. And they told me, what Adivasi girls? Upper caste girls are also not allowed to have phones. Yeah? They said, by the way, it was a big election issue in Rajasthan. Gehlot's government declared free cell phones to all women aged between 16 or 18 and whatever. That became an issue on morals, corrupting the morals of our girls in the last assembly election which Gehlot lost. You have to look at ourselves also. So now, actually we figured out how that girl got her education in those years. Now, typically a Palghar Adivasi male will be working in the brick kilns, Adivasi. So he'll go on Monday morning, early morning, come back on Saturday night. He and his eldest son or whatever. The Adivasi girl, to get her PDFs and online education, has to beg big brother and daddy for the borrowing loan of the phone to download all the PDFs that have accumulated. To download 200 bloody PDFs, you're going to have to pay an extra package to broaden the bandwidth, 200 rupees more, which they can't afford. Then you download all, it's time for daddy to go back to the brick kiln. You don't have the money to print it out. Printing it out will cost, 1 year of PDFs will cost you more than the printer. Maybe even as much as your phone. Right? So this is how those girls cope. So you have to do something. We don't have the option of saying, it's too bad, we can't do it. It's out of our hands. The state surveillance is out of our hands. We can't do it. But you better start discussing how we are to restore the rights of education to those young people. All over the country today, in the name of the national education policy, they are closing schools in remote areas, primarily affecting Adivasis. And in Maharashtra, 14,873 primary schools are scheduled for closure. Most of these are in remote. The whole idea of putting those schools there was to serve children in isolated remote areas, and now they are back. Now they are cancelling those schools. What happens to the children of denotified tribes, the Pardis, etc.? So you don't have an option, you have to do something. Let's do it.